a million times over again. I have always been curious about where I came from. Not in the sense of how I came to be born, but rather what circumstances came to be that made it possible for me to be born in the first place. Where did humanity come from? The animals in the forest and the fish in the sea. How did the earth come to be formed? Who shaped our solar system, the Milky Way galaxy, the universe? How did all of this, you and me, the sun and the trees, come to be? Those are the questions that have always haunted me. My mother says I have always been this way, curious. She says my head has always been on a swivel, looking around, searching. I don't know what made me such a curious child. It isn't as if anybody in my family was especially curious. My mother spent her days working at the grocery store down the street and her nights watching reality TV. My father was an insurance salesman who only sought new information when it involved his yearly search for new jobs, which never once resulted in any sort of action. Nor were any of my siblings ever seemingly curious. None of them ever sat and pondered like I did, or at least never to the depths to which my mind always seemed to be traveling. The only things they seemed to ponder about were what their next meal was going to be, or when their next play date was, or whose house they were going to sleep over at next, or how they were going to flip their bat when they hit that inevitable home run in their next Little League game. But not me. While they formed friendships, I sat alone in my room. I didn't play with figurines. I didn't play make-believe. I didn't play dress-up. I didn't watch TV. I just sat in my room, alone, with my chin in my hand, thinking. Every time I met somebody new, I greeted them like this. "Hi, my name is Hannah. Where do you think we came from?" And every time it seemed I received an entirely new answer, a story I had never before heard. One of my schoolmates said they came from their house via their mother's SUV. My mother said we came from God. My father said when a daddy loves a mommy, a stork delivers a baby to their front door. My sister said I came from an adoption agency upstate. My science teacher in the 10th grade said all human beings came from monkeys. The DNA test I took on my 18th birthday said I came from a mixture of European countries, Switzerland, Ireland, Finland, Poland, and a few others I could not remember. My old neighbor Steve, whom my mother told me to stay far away from, and whom I nevertheless talked to on a nearly weekly basis, said we were part of an alien race, that our distant ancestors were outcasts abandoned on what was at the time a desolate planet, because the planet we once lived upon had become so dangerously overpopulated that some of us had to go, our ancestors included. The point is, I have met many people who have given me many answers to the question, where do you think we came from? But of all the stories I have been told, of which there are thousands, none have appealed to me quite like the story my Nana told me when I was a child. And while I have been lucky enough to savor this story as my own for all these years, it is time I share it with the world. I think Nana would have liked that. I was 8 years old when Nana told me the story for the first time. My siblings and I had been dropped off at our house for our weekly visit while my parents tried to save their marriage with the help of a counselor. "What a waste of fucking money, Hannah," my father told me years later, after their inevitable divorce and his second marriage. "That therapist was not interested in saving our marriage. He just wanted to keep us in a perpetual state of..." But that's a story for another day. On this particular afternoon, I walked up to Nana as she sat in her rocking chair, knitting a sweater, and asked, "Nana, where do you think we came from?" I had asked her this question many times before. Usually she brushed me away with a silly response, but not this time. Not that day. "Sit," she said to me as she continued to knit, and so I took a seat in the rocking chair next to hers. "Hannah, dear, why do you want so badly to know where you are from?" "Not just me, Nana," I said, "but all of us. I want to know how we got here. I want to know where we came from. I want to know why we are here. I want to..." "What is my purpose, Nana?" Nana stopped knitting for a moment. She didn't look at me, though. Instead, she stared down at the sweater, or at her lap, or at the ground beneath her feet. What was going on inside of her mind, I do not know. She remained still for several moments, while I sat there with my hands crossed in my lap, waiting and watching. Finally, Nana returned to her knitting, and without looking up, she began to answer my question. "In the beginning," she said, "there was nothing. No trees, no wind, no rivers. No life, no cities, no societies. No suns, no moons, no galaxies. No grandkids, no mommies, no nanas, and no universe for such things to exist within. There was just nothingness stretching toward infinity. But from that nothingness came everything that has ever existed, and everything that will ever exist, and everything that currently exists, and everything that will never exist again. And it all started with a... Nana paused just long enough for me to lean forward. And then, as I moved closer still, she yelled, "Bang!" I jumped in my seat and giggled and waited for her to go on. But everything did not come immediately. Or not entirely, at least. You see, everything in existence can be attributed to that bang, as everything in this universe, when traced back to the beginning, originates there, in that bang, flowing eternally from it, rippling ever more toward the infinity that is the universe it helped to form. But the bang alone was not all that was needed for us to come into existence. We needed everything that came next. I was already hanging on her every word. "What came next, Nana?" I asked. She paused a moment, in both her knitting and her speaking. And then, again without looking up, she continued with both. "The creation of souls," she said. According to Nana, souls came into existence just moments after the bang, when the universe was still dark and empty and had hardly expanded more than a few inches toward the infinities around it. She described them, souls, as translucent beings. She declared them entirely invisible to the human eye and any technology we could ever create. She said if a soul was standing directly in front of me, I would have no idea it was there. I asked if there were any souls in the room with us then, in the room we sat in, as she knitted and told me her story. "All of your questions, my dear, will be answered in the end." And with that, she continued her story. These souls, though there were billions, did not have individual names, nor did they have any differentiating factors from a physical standpoint. Instead, they were identified purely from the tonality of their essence, which individual souls could recognize upon sight, even at incredible distances. They spoke to one another, not through auditory words, but through a mixture of telepathy and a thing Nana described as energy reading. They shared a connection with every other soul in the universe, allowing them to speak to one another despite being separated by billions of galaxies and trillions of light years. Not through words, but through a collective memory bank that gave them all access to the memories of every soul in existence. It was as if they were all part of the same tree, each soul serving as an individual root. They were not limited to the three simple dimensions that we human beings see in the world around us. Instead, souls saw the universe in thousands of dimensions. But like souls, said Nana, these dimensions, though they surround us in our every moment, are unseeable with our human eyes. In the end, the information about souls that Nana found most important, and I found the most difficult to believe with my 8-year-old mind, was this. Souls are uncorrupted by death. They are immortal beings. They cannot die, no matter what. "That's impossible," I said. "That doesn't make any sense," I said. "That is not life as I know it to be." Nana laughed as she continued to knit the sweater in her lap and said, "Hannah, truths don't always make sense. Reality isn't always what we wish it to be. Hypotheses are often formed only to be disproven. A fool looks at the world with preconceived expectations, never capable of understanding that anything is possible and nothing can ever truly be understood. They believe they already know all that is possible. But we," Nana said, gesturing at herself and at me, "we are not fools in this family, are we, my dear?" I shook my head. "No, Nana," I said, "we are not fools." "That's right," said Nana, "we are not fools. And nothing is impossible." With that, Nana continued knitting and telling her story. Every soul that has ever existed came into being at precisely the same moment, and in the moment that followed their creation, a ceremony took place during which every freshly created soul maneuvered their way through the still dark and otherwise empty universe in search of their perfect mate, to whom they eternally sealed themselves. How they connected to their mate was entirely unique to each pairing of souls. No two connections were alike, and no one soul could have possibly attached itself to any soul other than the soul the universe had created to be their eternal mate. If they even so much as attempted a mating with the incorrect soul, Nana said, as she began working on the left sleeve of the sweater, or with an incorrect method of attachment, the entirety of the recently created universe would have crumbled before them, returning everything to nothingness once more, making it impossible for you or me or anything you see around us to ever come into existence. But fortunately, no such catastrophe took place, for no such attachment was improperly attempted. Every soul knew their mate at first glance, and they sealed themselves upon sight in a way that made them and their mate no longer two individual souls, but rather a singular soul mate, forming a bond that was so complex that it was impossible to separate them back into individual souls. They were forever mated, Nana said, never to be individuals again. No matter what? I asked Nana. No matter what, she said. For quite some time, Nana went on to say, these souls together with their mates roamed the universe, though there wasn't much of anything for the souls to see. You see, Hannah, the universe was still dark and empty. But that all changed when our universe, in pursuit of infinite expansion, collided with the universe that existed outside of our own. There are more universes? I asked. There are infinite universes, Hannah, and each of them is as large and unique as the universe you and I call home. Nana proceeded to explain how our universe collided with another, allowing for elements to flow from one universe to the next in their temporary moment of overlapping. And though the universes quickly repaired their leaks, some things were lost forever, and other things permanently gained. Shaking off the disturbance of two universes colliding and momentarily merging, then separating once more, the souls internally communicated with one another. They mapped out where each pair had been sent after the collision and located a centralized meeting place. But the souls did not make it to this agreed-upon spot, and they never did reunite. And the universe never did recover the balance it once had before the collision. The entire trajectory of the universe was forever changed. For while many elements had leaked from our universe into the other, a very dark, very evil element had leaked into ours. And our universe could not rid itself of it before the hole was sealed, allowing for that element to become a permanent part of our universe. And so, as the souls attempted to make their way to their agreed-upon location, there was an attack, or an attempted attack, on one of the flocks. The perpetrator of this attack was a dark mass made up of this evil element. A mass in the darkness of the universe that the souls were unable to see, but whose presence they could feel, and upon it they immediately dispersed, and as they dispersed, they sent a warning to the others. The universe heard this warning, said Nana, and sprung into action. Suns exploded into existence, along with planets which, as more and more came to be, began to cluster around the newly born suns, forming the first ever solar systems. And those solar systems clustered together to form galaxies. Planets continued to form, crash, intermingle, fade away, then rise again from the ashes. Solar systems came and went. Shards of the universe were sent in all directions, toward all infinities. Chemicals came into existence, then fluttered into extinction in a matter of seconds. And as this chaotic explosion of universal substance occurred, colonies of souls began to settle upon freshly constructed planets. To further protect these souls, the universe covered each planet, occupied or not, in such gases that outside observers would see a desolate planet consumed with fires and floods, ice and volcanic ash, blizzards and tornadoes, hurricanes and quakes, while on the inside, those very same gases reflected rainbows to the souls below. Rainbows that did not require storms of any sort to show off their beauty. They simply existed, every day, vibrant all the time. Continuously, these sorts of planets came and went all across the universe, creating infinite galaxies filled with infinite planets, all coming and going, which only helped to perpetuate the difficulties of the dark mass filled with the evil element's pursuit of souls. What did the dark mass want with the souls, Nana? It wanted to once more be alone in its existence. It wanted to ensure that you and I could never exist. It wanted our universe to itself. One of the planets the souls landed on was the planet Earth, but it did not look like the Earth you know and see today. There were no McDonald's, no Taco Bells, no Starbucks, no baseball games, no movie theaters, no Nana's house, no cats, no dogs, and no sweaters to stitch. No McDonald's, I said, stunned. incapable of imagining such a world. None, said Nana. Not even a Starbucks? Not even one. She then went on to describe an Earth I could hardly understand, an Earth I could hardly imagine. I looked out the window in disbelief. The sky was multicolored and filled with everlasting rainbows arching in all directions. The ocean below reflected the beautiful colors from the sky above, ever-changing depending on the angle of the waves, providing always unique and stunningly beautiful views. The southern edge of the Earth's singular landmass was made of towering cliffs. There were gorgeous beaches on the northern end with sand so white it glimmered in the sunlight. The grass, where it existed, was always green, the dirt always soft, the soil always fruitful, and the fruits always in season and always plentiful. Souls efficiently used every inch of the land provided to them to build their community, and as they built, they ensured none of their infrastructure interfered with nature's integrity. They spoke to the planet and intertwined their lives with the earth itself. They worked together perfectly, like a well-oiled machine. The machinery was a thing that did not yet exist on the planet, nor oil. Only souls and nature and rainbows in harmony. Metropolises blossomed from the ground, reaching toward the rainbow-colored sky overhead, and every constructed item was made with the cooperation of souls and the planet itself. Trees grew in the most wonderful of shapes. Flowers sprouted across the entirety of the color spectrum, and fruits bloomed in excess, yet nothing went to waste. It was a perfect utopia made entirely of the earth itself, occupied only by the souls it was created to protect. What did the souls do all day? I asked Nana. They spent their days sitting on their porches, eating fruits and vegetables, watching as the cities around them bloomed larger and more beautiful. Or they sat on the ledge of the nearest cliff and watched as the waves turned from blue to red to purple to yellow. Or they gathered in the nearest city, large groups of soulmates, and shared stories. Tell me the stories they told each other, I said, and so Nana did. But those stories I will keep for myself. One day, the rainbow-colored sky went dark over the earth as the sun overhead was covered by what appeared to be a very large, very thick cloud. However, upon further investigation, it became clear that it wasn't a cloud at all, but rather the large, dark, evil mass that the souls of Earth had been warned about so long ago, before the universe exploded into what we now know it to be, and the diaspora of souls to freshly constructed planets occurred. The dark mass had the Earth and the souls upon it surrounded. I shrunk in my seat while Nana continued to knit the sweater. There was panic, said Nana, among the souls and the planet and the universe. The Earth suddenly began to reshape itself. Holes appeared all over the planet, forming caves leading to underground tunnels. The singular landmass split into multiple pieces. Those pieces went flying in all directions. Some collided with others, forming volcanoes that immediately erupted. Soon the Earth looked like every other planet in the universe did from the outside looking in, a place of chaos, panic, and fear. The planet continued to contort itself until all the souls had been safely secured within, the Earth covering them with water and mountains and layers of soil and grass and rocks and volcanic ash. But the dark mass, foreign to our universe, was undeterred in its pursuit of the souls of Earth. In the end, it did not matter where they hid, how deeply they were buried within the earth, what lengths the universe went to further cover them up. The dark mass found every soul, and when it did, like a vacuum, it pulled the souls into itself. What was inside the dark mass? I asked Nana. Little creatures, said Nana. Creatures that were the antithesis of souls. What does that word mean, Nana? Antithesis? Antithesis, dear. It means they are the opposite of souls. Like evil souls? The evilest. Once every soul had been pulled inside, a war was waged. There was a piercing scream that came from deep within the belly of the mass. Lightning bolts launched from it, striking the ground below, causing the oceans to roar, lakes to overflow, rainbows to fade. Cities crumbled, gardens withered, homes flooded, mountains toppled. The land masses that made up the planet Earth, already split into pieces, split furthermore. Then the screaming stopped. The storming ceased. And for a moment there was stillness. Nothing more than a dark mass floating above the surface of a now desolate and colorless planet. All signs of the utopia that once existed not so long ago had been entirely erased. All signs of such a world had been completely washed away. The dark mass opened, releasing thousands of souls no longer attached to their mates to the earth below. And as quickly as the dark mass had come, it went away, in search of other planets housing more souls still connected to their mates, still living upon their own utopian planets, in hopes of doing to them the same it had just done to the souls of Earth. With the departure of the dark mass, sunlight returned to the earth, upon which there was now no color and no movement. For billions of years, this is how the earth remained, motionless and desolate, with millions of souls ripped away from their mates, lying on the surface of the now destroyed planet, unable to move. Yet, souls are immortal beings, so without their mates, they were left to live an eternal life of immobility and loneliness on a planet once filled with beauty, now severed and destroyed. They were unable even to speak to the other souls on the planet with them. Even if they lay beside each other, it was as if they were universes apart. Nor were they able to converse with their fellow souls across the universe, to warn them or otherwise. For apart from their mates, their internal wirings had been ripped to shreds and their connections destroyed. "What happened to the souls?" I asked. Nana did not answer immediately. Instead, she sat there, patiently knitting, working hard on the right sleeve of the sweater, before finally clearing her throat and saying, while the earth had been weakened, while it was tired and broken, like the soul still lying upon it, the earth was not defeated. There was still energy within it, buried deep, almost non-existent, but it was there. And with that little bit of energy, the planet gave birth to the first form of life ever seen on Earth. It did so in the ocean, which, even after billions of years, still rocked from the storm caused by the visitation of the dark mass. This life form, a single-cell organism, slowly evolved over billions of years into something souls could use to guide them back to their mates. Nana, once more, had me on the edge of my seat. The creatures that spawned from this single-cell organism grew into all sorts of species of all shapes and sizes. They grew legs and arms and fins and teeth. Then one day, growing tired of the sea, one of the life forms escaped the water and wandered onto land. And so, within the sea and upon the land, the experiments continued. New creatures, new shapes, new sizes, new diets, new societies, new habitats, until eventually came a species that stood upright on two legs with two arms dangling by its side. This creature, said Nana, the first of its kind, came across a magical tree, and on that tree it discovered a dangling fruit. The creature, quite hungry, grabbed the fruit from the tree and bit into it. Do you know what fruit it was, Hannah? I shook my head. It was an apple. According to Nana, the juices from the apple flowed through the mouth of the creature and into its bloodstream. That blood flowed through the body and into the creature's brain. It was in the brain that the magic took place, for the juice from the apple quite literally reshaped the brain, creating in it a little crevice. This newly created crevice in the brain of this creature, said Nana, just so happened to be the exact same size as a soul. And a soul just so happened to be lying by the side of this magical tree. The soul lying by the tree had been there for billions of years, unable to move since it had been dropped in that location by the dark mass. But suddenly, as the creature stood over it, eating this magical apple, reshaping its brain within, the wirings of the soul, which it once used to latch to its mate, began to tingle. And as the creature took bite after bite, the wirings lifted in the direction of the creature, until suddenly the soul found itself standing, moving toward the creature. And with each step, the soul grew increasingly stronger and determined in its pursuit. The soul, following an intuition it did not fully understand, grabbed onto the left leg of the creature and climbed, up its leg, onto its waist, its stomach, chest, neck, face, and then finally onto its nose, where the soul then slithered inside the right nostril. Once inside, the soul discovered the newly created crevice inside the creature's brain, where standing erect were wires similar to its own. So the soul, growing more curious with each passing moment, tinkered with its wires and the internal wirings of the brain and now found itself inside. It took this wire and wrapped it around that part of the brain. It took that wire and wrapped it around this, and so on and so forth, until suddenly the soul felt a new strength, a new power, a new connection. Not quite as strong as the connection it once had billions of years before when it was attached to its mate, but a connection that was still incredibly strong. It was a bond that was inseparable, unbreakable, except for the occurrence of one thing: the death of the creature whose brain it was now connected. Furthermore, the connection was not strong enough for the soul to force the creature to move this way or the other. It could not use this connection to change the way the creature inherently thought. It could not do anything other than whisper ideas to the creature's subconscious, wait as those thoughts festered over a duration of time, and slowly inspire the creature to act in a way it did not always understand, following an inkling in its mind whose source could not be found. And just like that, said Nana, the first human being on Earth had found its soul. That creature, I said, it was a human? It was. Like you and me? That's right, Hannah. A human being like you and me. I began to ponder. I wondered about this, and I wondered about that. And then, finally, I asked, is there a soul inside of me, Nana? Is there a soul inside of you? Nana laughed. Patience, my dear, she said. As I have stated before, all of your questions will be answered in the end. And with that, Nana continued her story. For years, that first human being, following the guidance of an influence it did not understand, provided by a soul within that it did not know existed, wandered the earth in search of a thing it could not see, with no awareness of what it was looking for. It wandered valleys, mountains, riverbanks, and coastlines, chasing a thing it did not know it chased, feeling an emptiness, a longing it could never satisfy, despite how hard it tried to do so. And when this human being was, in the end, incapable of finding what the soul within so desperately desired, it collapsed, and the human being died. With this death, the connection that kept the soul in place in the crevice of this human's brain was broken, as the wirings of the human being were no longer strong enough to contain the soul, and so the soul was expelled from the body, dropped back to the dust it had spent so much of its existence in, where it remained next to the body, which slowly rotted and faded into oblivion until it was nothing more than bones and fragments of food for the larva of earth to slowly consume, until once more, with the larva now gone, the soul was alone. That soul remained there in the dirt for centuries, until finally another human, which too had evolved to the state of having the same crevice in the brain, came near enough to give that soul the strength to stand and latch itself within. Once inside the brain, the soul slowly and painstakingly and exhaustively influenced that human body to further roam the earth, taking it into deeper valleys, up higher mountains, across wider riverbanks, along longer coastlines. This continued, this influencing of this second human body in search of its mate, until that human body also grew tired, sick, weak, and eventually fell to its death, expelling the soul once more to the dust, causing the cycle to begin anew, again and again and again. But as the soul cycled through dozens, and then hundreds, and then thousands of human bodies, it did not grow weary, it did not grow dejected, and it did not grow hopeless. It remained, through it all, optimistic that it would one day be reunited with its mate, even if it took millions of years, billions, trillions. The soul had time. It had infinite time. Then one day, said Nana, the soul located its mate bodiless in a lake, submerged beneath several feet of water. The human that housed the soul within saw nothing with its human eyes, but the soul could see its mate, even beneath all that water. To the soul, its mate glowed. The light of its presence radiated from hundreds of yards away. The soul influenced the body to go towards the lake, and with each step the body took toward the soul's long-lost mate, the stronger grew the soul's influencing powers over the body. And so, even while the body, which was terribly afraid of drowning, did not want to get any deeper into the lake than it already was, A voice within, now screaming, convinced it otherwise, until the body was nearly neck-deep in the water. Nana was no longer knitting. Instead, she was standing. She was speaking triumphantly. She gestured the steps the soul forced the human body to take with great exaggeration, her knees nearly hitting her chest, her arms swinging high and wide, her chest sticking out as far as it would go. The soul within demanded that the body stop directly in front of its mate. Nana gestured a dramatic stop. The soul attempted desperately to unlatch itself and undo the wires that connected it to the brain. But the soul quickly remembered what it had learned long ago, that it was impossible to unlatch from a human body that was still alive. For in the process of sealing itself to the brain of the human being, it had formed a connection that could not be voluntarily terminated. So the soul within, just inches away from its long-lost mate, could do nothing but influence the human to reach confusedly toward the mate in hopes of grabbing it, picking it up, and placing it next to the soul that already occupied its mind. However, the hand simply went into its mate and threw it. This too Nana mimed. She knelt down in the middle of the living room and reached down her hand. She swept the top of the carpet and came up empty-handed. She did this a few more times, growing more and more despondent with each attempt. Then, the soul had a sudden idea, said Nana. It influenced the body to stand and begin to dance. Nana too began to dance in the funkiest way imaginable. She kicked her feet in the air and flapped her arms. Then she bounced on one foot, spun in circles, rapidly touched her fingertips to her nose, ear, chest, eye, knee, then back to her nose. She clapped her hands, banged her chest, made wild noises with her tongue and lips. She breathed rapidly and whistled and screamed and whispered gibberish. She wiggled her toes and fingers. She kicked forward and backward, touched her heels, kissed her elbows. I laughed so hard in my seat that I nearly peed myself. "Stop it, Nana," I said. "Stop it, stop it. I'm going to pee. I'm going to pee." But she did not stop until I rolled off my seat and raced to the bathroom. Once I returned, I asked her, "What did that silly dance mean, Nana?" "To the body that performed the dance," Nana said, "it meant nothing. But to the soul within, and to the soul beneath the water, it meant, it's me, your mate. It meant, I found you. It meant, I'm inside this human body. It meant, I'm going to find you your own human body. It meant, when I find you that body, I need you to latch yourself to its brain, located here, through this nostril. It meant, I'm going to leave you now, but I promise I'm going to return. It meant, I found you. I finally found you." Finished with its dance, the soul influenced the body to turn and run out of and away from the lake, which wasn't so hard to do, considering the body had been aching to leave ever since its strange arrival. The body and the soul within ran towards some smoke in the distance, smoke that could indicate only one thing: the presence of human beings. When the body returned to the lake, it was no longer alone. It guided its new partner by the shoulders, moving it as needed to the left and right, forward and backward. "Right there," it said. The soul within the lake, with wires now fully erect, began to climb up the body and toward the face. It slithered its way into the right nostril as instructed and into the little crevice inside of its brain. Then, after a moment's silence, the two bodies embraced. And the mating of these two souls, thanks to these two human bodies, though not nearly as strong as it once was before, had been reignited. "For years," said Nana, "these two human bodies were inseparable. Where one went, the other followed. This continued until one of the bodies got sick. Knowing this was a sign that death was near, the healthy human whispered to the soul of the other, 'I will find you another human body. And I will continue to find you bodies 1,000,000 times over again. I will find you humans without a soul and bring them to you so that we can be together again. I promise, my love. I promise. 1,000,000 times over again. 1,000,000 times over again.' With this promise understood, the body died, and the soul within was expelled." At this point in the telling of her story, Nana had finished stitching the sweater. She lifted it up and examined it closely, inch by inch. "Here," she said to me, "try this on." So I did. And as I did, Nana said, "That, Hannah, is where we came from. We are the gift provided by Earth for the souls it was built to protect. That is why we seek with such fervor love in all that we do. For we are, in actuality, influenced by an inner soul in its everlasting pursuit of its eternal mate. The sweater fit perfectly, though it was incredibly itchy. I fought the desire to scratch, then lost. And as I scratched all over, I asked, "Where do you think my soulmate is, Nana?" Nana smiled. "Isn't it clear, my dear?" I shook my head. "It's right here," said Nana, pointing at herself. "You?" "Me." I didn't believe her at first. I thought she was just being silly, telling jokes, making funnies. But I no longer think that. Now, I know she was telling the truth. You see, 2 years ago, Nana passed away from cancer. I knew of her passing before the call came. At the moment she died, I felt a sudden weakness come over my body, a weakness that forced me to immediately sit down. Instantly, I had a headache and a thought. "Nana," I said to myself. I thought back to the last time I had seen her, which was just a few days prior to her passing. She was lying in bed, bald and weak. There was a tube flowing oxygen through her nostrils. She had a pulse oximeter on her finger. There was a needle in her arm slowly feeding her chemicals. For the first 3 days I was there, she did not say a word. She did not as much as open her eyes. She was, so it seemed, in a vegetative state. "Any day now," the doctor kept saying to me. "Say your goodbyes," she said, "while she can still hear you." And so I did. I sat at her bedside and held her hand, which was incredibly cold. I told her that I loved her. I thanked her for everything she had done for me as a child and young adult. I told her I would cherish her stories forever. And I told her I would find her again. 1,000,000 times over again, I said. Those were the last words I ever said to her. At least, those were the last words I ever said to her while she was still inside the human body that represented my Nana. But I know I will see her again. 1,000,000 times over again.